So I just kind of wrote a song that was examining why and how people were drawn to the first thing, which is self-reliance, a simpler life, while also kind of poking fun a little bit at the second thing, which is that, knowing how to grow your own food and cook your own food necessarily means that you have to all of a sudden adopt a 19th century mentality towards household roles, and like who takes care of what in the house. So it was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek social commentary.
Hey, welcome to the Unmasked podcast. My name is Ashley Chevalier, and before we get to our guest, I just want to welcome you to the show, let you know what we've got going on. Unmasked talks about everything. That's why it's called Unmasked. I'm a woman in the music industry. I've been a performer for 33 years. You've heard that correctly. My first performance was when I was 5, and once you set foot on stage, man, it never stops. So today we're talking about a new album that came out this year from a Northern Virginia-based songwriter named Annie Stokes. Beautiful, beautiful album, both in its lyrical content, its melody, its production, and then it's in its release, and of course, the lovely lady herself, Annie Stokes. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, well, it's a newbie, and we do end up talking about a lot of music around here because
that's what we do.
That's what we do. I'm sure it's not all that we do because we are multifaceted people. A couple of things, listeners, as you know, we're going to talk about today a little bit about Annie's album, Ghostwriter, what she's got coming up, and then a little bit about her new Grammy membership, what it's like to be a female in the industry. We've both been in it for over a decade. We've seen a lot of things change and transform. We're both moms, what it's like to be an artist, a songwriter, as a mother, how we're making money in that regard. And we might even talk a little bit about vocal technique because that's what I really like to lean into as well. So, Annie, tell us a little bit about Ghostwriter. I know you have several other works out there. You can go find Annie on anniestokesmusic.com, correct?
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. But we're just going to talk about your latest release. Tell me a little bit about the inspiration behind the album.
So, Ghostwriter kind of came about because we had been banking up these songs. And when I say we, my husband, Will Berger, he's my co-writer and my kind of business partner, and also just my life partner. So we had been working on these songs and banking them up, and we had kind of been looking towards the next step. We had released Wild Rose, which was an EP. It was the first time we were working with our current producer, and it definitely opened some doors for us, but we also released it at the tail end of COVID. We had just had a baby. So we didn't really do a crazy release plan. So we were looking to use that as a stepping stone for our next project. And then we had the experience of losing a friend in the music industry to cancer. And we also, both of us kind of arrived at our mid-30s at the same time. And we just had this moment of reflection about what it means to continue living when other people have passed away and what it means to keep getting the opportunity to stop and reflect on your life, especially when you are now officially, I think there's like millennials, Gen Z, and others Gen Alpha. So we're like 2 generations removed from being relevant. So we were just thinking about how the older you get, the more that you become a ghostwriter for everybody who you've met and for all the experiences that you've had. So yeah, it's definitely a reflective album. It's an album for everybody, but I definitely wrote it not trying to relate to 19-year-olds. I wrote it very much as like a woman in my mid-30s.
Well, I think that's great. I think when you speak directly to your comrades, for whatever term, that it resonates further. Definitely resonated with me. I still listen to quite a few of the tracks on there. Another artist that I listen to fairly regularly is Carly Harvey, as far as independent artists is concerned, and occasionally Karen Jonas. Because we're all offering, and I think about this a lot, you say Ghostwriter, we are offering a generational and historical timestamp for regional and national and international culture when we are doing this historical narrative, like this is what's going on, this is how we're feeling, and there are a lot of things that are intersecting there. And it's very different from someone who is 19 when we're in our mid-30s. But later in life, there will be points of that narrative that resonate with them, right? So Taylor Swift is a great model for that, right? Like she has written to this person And I call her the Disney trope of pop music because she really was. She started out as Cinderella, right? And they just replayed and reinvented her narrative. But what she did do was write for the stage of her life with those people, and she's carried them along, which not all artists do. Conversely, you might have someone like Chris Stapleton, who is still speaking generally to his demographic, but he always has. And it's not really, it's kind of a timeless human stamp as opposed to the drama of life, right?
Yeah, and more power to people who can write in that kind of timeless way. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I also, especially, and we'll probably, Ashley, and you and I will talk about this, but I think especially being a woman who's getting older, it can feel kind of like the world is telling us to become a little bit quieter. But in reality, I've never felt more like qualified to talk about my life and my experiences than I have, so I feel like there's definitely a little bit of rebellion in just like kind of reaching out to my demographic, and especially reaching out to my demographic on the platforms that they're on, which
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily TikTok, for instance. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, okay, so that'll bring me to another interesting point, and that is historically women in history, there are a few who break out in their early in their teens. Like if we want to just talk about music, we want to talk about like, you can talk about the Britney Spears and the women who their careers kind of got cut short because they started so early. Where if you get Chanel, or I mean, go all the way back to, I don't know how old Joan of Arc was, but you're talking about Queen Elizabeth, the women who've really made history,
Mhm.
they were definitely past their prime in cultural context of what? Getting married and having children. I'm not opposed to any of that. I'm married and I have a child.
Yeah.
So I think it's a beautiful thing. What seems to not have changed are the chains around culturally, globally. And I can't speak to every culture, but this seems to be a common thread that you're older now, nobody wants you.
Which is so funny because right now, the older you get as a person, but especially as a woman, I think the older you get, the more wisdom you have to share. Also, I'm a parent. I have a 5, almost 6-year-old, and I have a 3.5-year-old, and they're taking up a lot of my time and energy right now. And I can imagine in my 40s and 50s, I'll have so much more time to pursue the arts because they won't be, asking me to cook for them and change them, and the way that young kids are very dependent on you. So I think it's very funny that women, we consider older and child-free women, or like older mothers, to be past their prime, when in reality, if you look at what they're able to accomplish, that would probably be what I would consider to be the prime of someone's life.
Especially when you consider how much you learn and working selflessly in support of another human's life.
Exactly.
Right? Like
Exactly.
that sacrifice is demonstrative and a teacher in and of itself. And that's not to say that, you hit to a certain age and you haven't had children and you don't have other things to offer. That's not what I'm saying.
Exactly. And
We're just speaking.
I'm not saying anything against child-free women. In fact, my child-free friends keep me sane, and I love them.
Yeah. We're just hitting the main point of like, as you get older, you have more to offer. Like,
Yes,
you know.
absolutely.
So, but that brings us back to Ghostwriter. And as we're talking about being mother and country wife, being the first track on there, tell me about that song. I love that song.
Thank you.
And I want to hear the story behind the tarot card reader.
Okay. So I'll start with Country Wife. Over the pandemic, I kind of noticed 2 trends happening on social media. The first was like the sourdough trend, a lot of people kind of staying home and all of a sudden realizing like, okay, maybe some systems that we had been reliant on are not as sturdy as we thought they were, and wouldn't it be so cool if we learned how to like raise chickens or make sourdough, or just kind of have a slower life, which I'm totally all about. I really enjoy doing stuff like that. But then kind of right adjacent to that and kind of sneaking in through the back door of that trend was something else that I think is not up my alley and not something I support, which is like Christian submissive trad wives. Not that I'm at all opposed to religion or people who are, choosing to live a certain way. I'm just not a huge fan of the whole, like, your gender means that you have to submit to another gender type of situation. So I just kind of wrote a song that was examining why and how people were drawn to the first thing, which is self-reliance, a simpler life, while also kind of poking fun a little bit at the second thing, which is that, knowing how to grow your own food and cook your own food necessarily means that you have to all of a sudden adopt a 19th century mentality towards household roles, and like who takes care of what in the house. So it was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek social commentary.
Okay, so I think that I want to clarify what you're addressing is a Protestant, US-based rural country and European-born concept, still Protestant or Anglican concept of what it means to be a woman in this day and age.
Yes, and specifically, there are some influencers who peddle this idea of being a traditional woman or housewife, and maybe
woman.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe they don't clarify, for instance, that their husband makes a ton of money, or that they make a lot of money from certain sponsorships that they get from their account. And so maybe this type of lifestyle that they're selling is not actually truly accessible. But I mean, here's
a little hypocritical.
Right? Yeah, or it's a little hypocritical.
You're just doing a job like someone else if you're earning money. Yeah, I can go a little more in depth after you finish that. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, but I also really would love to have chickens, and I want to get better at making sourdough. So, I mean, one thing doesn't necessarily have to lead to the other.
That's true. Yeah, crunchy moms, as it were, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a couple of different things that lead back to that, because I could get into social tunnel bias, where we are heavily socially and culturally affected by only what we're seeing on social media. But most of the people I know who have chickens and grow their own food, like, they're not necessarily aligned with a religion. They are wanting a better life for themselves and their kids, and they don't want all the chemicals that are in their environment, and they want life to slow down a little bit.
Totally.
Being a pioneer or being a farmer is not a slower life. It is a very hard life. Let's just go ahead and dispel that. Like,
exactly,
if you're sustaining your land, both husband and wife know how to shoot a gun, kill a chicken, and protect their places. And this is peasant to whatever, to the bureaucracies that have fallen, right? Like, let's not this.
And exactly. And in the music video for Country Wife, which came out not too long ago, there's I play a couple different farm roles, and one of them is the Instagram aesthetic farm wife, and she's wearing high heels and stuff. But I mean, I'm descended from farmers who were in the Midwest and who are from the Great Plains, and everybody was working really hard and nobody was having the best time. Or they were, but you know what I mean. No one had a soft filter and a gingham dress and a really chill, sunlight filtering through the window while they kneaded the dough type of situation.
Yeah, and they bore babies that died, right? Because they couldn't feed them or because their immunity was down. It was not for the faint of heart, and it certainly wasn't your highlight reel on social media.
It wasn't your highlight reel.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great way to talk about Country Wife, and you're the first person who said it, but now I think I'll keep saying it, that Country Wife pokes fun at the highlight reel of what I saw a lot of during COVID.
Yeah, and that comes down to people exploiting the visual to sell something.
100%.
Which isn't honest. So I don't care how people make their money, right? If someone's buying into it and they're getting their I don't care, because they are painting an ideal that in some ways, I guess, gives some people hope. I will say, as a pastor's wife, because I am one, that Proverbs 31 is very misunderstood in a lot of ways, and submission is misunderstood, partnership is misunderstood. Proverbs 31 very much talks about women working. She gets up early and she goes and trades her things. And Deborah was a prophet who was a judge. Okay. Now, we're not talking about church roles and all of that stuff, but that's also not what you're talking about. You're talking about what women's role in society is. But I think it also kind of feeds into this new princess culture, which collides greatly with what they're playing at, right?
100%.
Baking pies is great, not everybody can afford to be a stay-at-home wife, whatever generated that. And the pioneers certainly were not.
100%.
I love that point. So what about the tarot card reader?
So I went to school at Lynchburg College, now the University of Lynchburg. I lived in Lynchburg for a year afterwards. So I drove down Route 29 a whole lot. And I still do because I have family in Crozet. And there are a bunch of tarot, or like one or two, maybe three. They may have moved, but like if anybody has ever driven on a rural highway, they are aware of the sign that says $10 psychic readings. They pop up all over the place. I'm sure this is not unique to Route 29. And it just I always think of it, and I've never been quite down bad enough on a drive to Lynchburg to like stop and get my palm read. I've gotten my palm read and I've gotten my tarot read before, but I always think of that, and I always imagine what mood you have to be in to just like randomly stop and get your fortune told. And then, so that's always been in the back of my mind. And then one night I really don't do a lot of Facebook stalking. I don't do a lot of social media stalking, mostly because I just don't support hurting my own feelings. But I was in a funny mood and I just decided to look up a bunch of like ex-friends, ex-partners. You know, I'm very happily married, don't think about the past a lot. So it just felt like a funny thing to do, and saw that some of them are like doing well, which I'm genuinely glad. I make this joke a lot, but I am genuinely glad that people are doing well. But also, like, I realized that I had only ever thought of them as being jerks in my personal narrative. So I just wrote a story about what it means to have this person in your history who fulfills a very important role, which is the villain, and then to kind of maybe realize that they're not, or like they fulfill many different roles.
Yeah.
The duality of man, you know, we're all the main character in our own stories, and that means that your villain is the hero in their own story.
Sometimes
people just suck. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes they're their own villain.
So true.
Well, I really enjoyed, and then we'll shift on to a couple of other things, but I really enjoyed the variety of country influences in it. From
Thank
the
you.
bluegrass to the more popular flair in folky, it lands solidly in country folk for me.
Yeah, that was the
And
goal.
you know, your voice reminds me a little bit of Caroline Spence. Do you know who she is?
I do, yeah.
She's a great songwriter. I encourage everybody to listen. She's on Rounder Records, or she was. I cover her song "Angels Are Los Angeles." It's a great song. I just do it live sometimes. Anyway, okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the business side of this. And having both of us been in this for over a decade as women in Northern Virginia, I've toured all over. How far have you toured?
I've toured all the way up to Brooklyn, down to North Carolina, as far west as Tennessee. Okay. So basically I'm an East Coast musician.
Okay. I've done Delaware to Tennessee down to Florida. I did a week in Key West for New Year's.
Nice.
So, and it's exciting, right? But you see a lot of the similarities. And we already know that, like, the main way that you and I will make money as a musician right now is through touring and merchandise sales, right?
Yeah.
Or we can shift into sync placements and things like that. It takes more time. It's a different model, right? And I don't want to say it's more competitive, but in some ways it is. In some ways it isn't, the payout, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't know, sync placement or licensing songs is where you try to find other media to use your music, be it a commercial or a TV series or a movie, maybe even the background of another podcast or show. But again, it takes a lot of time, and we're diversifying the model. What you and I have both talked about and seen is that I don't know the stats for fully, but usually when I go play a bar somewhere for, X amount of dollars, I'm one of like all the guys. Do I see another woman on the bill? And this is something that is as culturally responsible as it is the listener and the owners and the style of songs and people's mentality towards hearing a female voice where they want to be dined in and where they want to dine in and entertain. Has that been your experience?
It has been my experience, and it is tough. And I appreciate what you said, where it isn't just the talent buyer, it's not just the booking agent, it's not just the people in charge, it's also the people who are listening. But I will say it's also the people who feel empowered or entitled enough to give feedback, because I'm a female singer. From listening to my recordings, you might gather that I have like a mezzo-soprano voice, so I do quite well when I'm playing at wineries and listening rooms and stuff like that. But if I'm playing at bars or breweries where people might be more used to listening to like a louder or lower male type voice, that can be a challenge. However, at every single one of these bars or breweries, there are wives, girlfriends, and other fans of all genders of female music. You know what I mean? So I feel like sometimes I'm up against a preconceived notion of what people want to hear at a bar and not necessarily what people respond to at a bar or at a beer
Man,
garden or at a brewery.
no, yeah, no kidding, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't want to sing the same things everyone else sings. You and I have a similar set list
Yeah, I don't do a
for
ton
a
of top
ghost.
40, for instance. Like if there's a new hit song that comes out and it doesn't strike my fancy, I'm not going to take a bunch of time to go learn it. However, if I love it, then I'll learn it. But I'm not the type of person where I'm just like a karaoke machine for like whatever is on the radio currently.
Well, and also, most people's favorite songs are slow cry songs,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not Tom Petty, and I love Tom Petty, but I don't really play any of his songs.
If I play Tom Petty, I'm playing Annie Stokes covers Tom Petty.
Yeah.
It's not gonna sound like him, obviously.
Yeah, no, same thing. I get that. Actually, I just did, and girl, you'll feel me on this one. I just recorded 10 tracks in one day live.
Are you okay?
It was exhausting. I cried, but I got a full album out of that.
Nice.
It's amazing that I was able to do that. I had one takes on a few, but I have a couple of covers coming out on that.
That's incredible.
It'll be out probably in October. I'm excited about it. But how do you make money off an album? It's just a musical business card unless
It's really hard. And I have to say, a lot of it, like this past year, and I could talk about this endlessly, and it's going to be the topic of many newsletters and Substacks coming out, but this past year has really been like almost like a spiritual shift for me as a musician, looking at the music industry, looking at what it's turned into, which is essentially like you have to be a full-time content creator, which I have no interest in doing, and I'm also not good at that. And I also do not have the capacity to tour full-time. I'm a parent. I have other financial obligations. So a lot of what I'm trying to do going forward is just do what makes me happy. And obviously I do have financial obligations as a human on planet Earth, but like making an album for us right now, which we have no intention to do again for a couple years because we just had a baby. We're not going to like go have another baby right now, but like it was something that made us feel really good about our artistic integrity, and it was something that made us feel really good because we put something out that people are enjoying. I will say the actual album portion of the musical career is not what's making us money right now. You know what I mean?
But it's expected and it's expensive.
It's expected. We are not going to be able to book the type of gigs that make us money if we don't have that album out there, and if we're not staying relevant in certain publications and radio stations that we admire and that we feel drawn to. So it was something we had to do, but it's certainly not the thing that's putting money back in the coffers.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I could do a whole nother podcast or 5 on that. Well, we've talked a lot about I'll make this point about being a female in the industry. Some areas it's just harder to break into because of what we talked about, right? Like I've been performing literally, however, I was 5. I'm 39 now. I have no problem talking about that. No problem. So I said 33 years at the beginning of the podcast. It's actually 34. First time I did a solo and it never stopped. I've got, 2 full albums, a third and a fourth, and a third and a fourth done, and a 5th one coming out after that, and I've got like 8 singles. I've been doing this a long time, and some of that just hasn't changed. It's like, wow, some of it's high volume, and there's not an expectation that I should be heard or should perform somewhere. It's just that glass ceiling that people talk about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
I'm like, and I don't even, what's feeding that glass ceiling, what's building that glass ceiling may be different than what it was. I don't have all the cultural statistics that are feeding that. And I definitely think women have more opportunities now than they used to.
For sure.
And it's not like they treat you poorly. Like, I will say they're treating musicians, most venues are treating musicians better than they've ever treated musicians. It's interesting, though, that the money isn't quite different.
Yeah.
Musicians in the 70s are making $200 a show, and it's not much better than that.
Yeah.
And people are complaining about the price of eggs. I'm like, okay, well.
What I think when we're working through biases and uncovering biases, the thing that falls first is overt bias. And so those are people who are just kind of like overtly misogynistic and overtly sexist. They either just kind of get shut out of the industry or they realize they've been wrong. That's a good thing. And now I think that haven't necessarily tackled all of overt bias, but I think we've kind of have been having very open conversations about like what sexual prejudice and also just like sexual harassment and abuse looks like. But now we're at the hard part, which is like the ingrained unconscious bias. And like for me, what I've noticed, and Ashley, because maybe we should tell our audience that you work for the same booking agency that books me. But and you're a female booking agent, so obviously I'm not talking about you or our company, but like from working in the agency that a lot of venues are also bars and breweries, and the alcohol industry is very dominated by men. So basically, a lot of very, very well-intentioned and wonderful men who do not ever intend to shut women out of spaces they subconsciously do because they tend to be friends with men and they tend to work with men and they tend to hire their friends. So we're talking not about people who are malicious or bad or people who are not our allies or anything like that. And I do want to make that clear because like literally like 90% of my friends are in the music and therefore alcohol business.
It's not a finger pointing.
That's finger pointing at all.
It's not a finger pointing.
It's more of just kind of figuring out like, okay, so we have the majority of people are saying they want something and then it doesn't seem to be working out. So let's kind of figure out these unconscious, deeply ingrained ways that certain people are getting left out of the conversation. And you're completely right. These are not our enemies or the bad guys or anything like that. It's just something I've noticed as somebody who sings primarily in bars, basically.
It comes back to, and we'll pin it here with the comment of like, why aren't we playing listening rooms? That's a different ball game, and I have a big respect for people who hold the business operations behind a listening room. It is expensive. It's hard to do it, and so you have to be able to pull. But the bias it definitely feeds into that. Okay, I know we're running in on the end of our time. You'll have to come on and talk more about this stuff with me.
Absolutely.
At some point. Tell me what you've got coming up next. And remember, you can go to Annie Stokes Music. She's on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube.
Well, thank you so much for having me. What I've got coming up next, well, you can go to anniestokesmusic.com and you can check out all my shows. I have a handful of those winery and brewery shows coming up. I'm playing at Crossroads Music Festival in Leesburg on September 20th. I'm playing at Rue Fest at the Farm in Leesburg on September 27th. I'll be playing at Charlottesville on October 11th, so that's going to be Birdcage at the Belmont in Charlottesville.
That's a great place.
I'm really excited about that. But also, speaking about slowing down, speaking about doing music in a way that kind of fills up our cups a little bit more, I'm coming up on a season of expanding my creative endeavors to help other artists out and kind of be behind the scenes a little bit. So I'm working on Leesburg Listening Room. I'm on the production committee for a songwriter series, Leesburg Listening Room. I'm also helping to produce Rue Fest at the Farm. And then my production company is going to be helping out with a musical, Into the Woods. So I've been literally my favorite musical. So that's going to be happening in November in Loudoun County. I've just found that when I can make music a little bit less about me and my career all the time, it turns into something that can be like a vocation and something that's sustainable and long-term. So with my kids entering school this fall and with just a lot of family obligations this fall, I'm really leaning into that kind of like mentoring and helping others chapter of my career. But that being said, I'll still be around playing songs and stuff, so I'd love to see you at one of those shows.
Yeah, don't stop any of that. I've been doing booking and event production since I was 22. So
and it's fun and it fills you up in a very different way and it makes it feel so much better to then focus on your own stuff and promote your own shows if you can really stand behind another artist and support them in that way. And so I'm really excited to be doing that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, Annie. I'm glad to hear that you're finding fulfillment in all those things, and I'll keep enjoying your album. Thanks for jumping on. I know we both got a jet.
Yeah.
I hope you have a great day and a great fall season.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And yeah, thanks for listening.
I'll talk to you soon. Bye.